A ceasefire between Hamas and Israel resulted in streets full of people celebrating in the early hours of Friday morning. The truce ended 11 days of violent clashes between Gaza and Israel. Gaza health officials said 232 Palestinians, including 65 children, were killed and more than 1,900 wounded in Israeli airstrikes by artillery bombardments. Israel said it had killed at least 160 combatants. According to authorities, the death toll in Israel is 12, with hundreds of people treated for injuries in rocket attacks. For more on the Israel and Hamas ceasefire and what could be the next possible way forward, I am joined now by Dr. Swikani Ncube, a senior lecturer in the Department of Public Law at the University of Johannesburg. Doctor, good to have you with us once again this afternoon. Talk to us about the significance of this ceasefire. What does it really mean for the conflict that continues to exist between Hamas and Israel?
Good afternoon, Thami, and good afternoon to your listeners as well. Thank you for having me. I think what the ceasefire means really, it means more for civilians than it does for the overall picture. If I were to sum up the whole thing in a statement, I would say the battle has ended, but the war continues. So from my perspective, I would say it's a ceasefire that benefits civilians, as you just stated, that we have more than 200 people that have been killed in Palestine, in Gaza. And of course, the Israelis are bound to say it was a good chunk of them were militants, but that cannot be proven. So yes, I would say the battle has ended, but the war continues.
This really has been touted as the fourth biggest war confrontation between these two parties since they started in 2008. What is going to make this one different from previous interventions?
That's a good question, actually, because there's nothing at the moment to suggest that things would turn out differently. Now, I listened to the speech by the U.S. President, Joe Biden, and he says this ceasefire presents a good opportunity, a great opportunity for peace. And I asked myself, in what respect? Because this is not significantly different to how previous events have turned out. But to get back to what you have just asked about what it presents, I think everybody has been saying from the onset that we needed a political solution. And Egypt and Qatar have stepped over and they have given us that political solution. But going forward, we need a durable solution. And that will only come if both the Israelis and the Palestinians come together without preconditions and have a conversation about what sort of arrangements they think would work. Now, everybody has been talking about a two-state solution or a binational state where you have Palestinians and Israelis living in the same space. But that solution has to come from them. They have to sit down and discuss and agree on what they think will be a solution for a peaceful resolution of this conflict.
I wonder what you think about this, Doctor, the fact that both the parties are claiming victory. We saw the Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz tweeting saying that this has been a victory for Israel, but we also hear Hamas and even the people on the streets saying that this is a victory for the revolution. So in the eyes of each party respectively thinks that they have, quote unquote, won this particular round of the attacks. What does this say about the status quo between the two parties and where their mindsets are at as far as wanting to find and chart a way forward?
I must add, in addition to what you have just said, that a Hamas official just said that they have their hand on the trigger, right? And that tells you all you need to know about the situation right now. So all the parties, both of them, let me not say all because there are only two, both parties have claimed victory. And this has more to do with propaganda than the events on the ground. So for the Palestinians, even we're told that even the speakers in their mosques have been broadcasting messages about the victory of the resistance. So what resistance are they talking about? And on the Israeli side, the defense minister said they've made major and significant military gains, more than they have done in the past. And both those statements are quite suspicious. And you can tell that it is just meant to send a message to the other party that, listen, we didn't back off from this confrontation. We are doing it for other interests. If there is need to continue, we'll certainly do so. As I said, that a Hamas official just said they have their hand on the trigger, and that tells us everything that we need to know about their state of mind.
This is really, Dr. Ncube, a Hamas-Israeli conflict this time round. My question is, where are the Palestinian authorities? Where is their voice as the official leadership of the Palestinian people?
That's the question that I've been asking as well. But it's easy to understand why it's been an issue between the Israelis and Hamas. Now, for the benefit of our viewers, when Israelis accuse militants of firing rockets, they accuse Hamas. So it's not the Palestinian Authority. So it was inevitable that the conversation was going to major on Hamas and not the Palestinian Authority. So right now, Hamas is the person or the party that everybody needs to bring onto the table. And again, I'll make reference to what the US President Joe Biden said, that in reconstructing Gaza right now, they are going to work with the Palestinian Authority, they're going to work with the United Nations, and they're going to work with the exclusion of Hamas. And that is quite dangerous, because Hamas, despite the fact that nobody wants to engage with them, despite their tag that they carry as a terrorist organization, they have a great deal of influence and a role to play in finding a solution in the whole thing. So yes, it's been about the Palestinians, Hamas, and the Israelis, chiefly because they are the ones that are accused of firing rockets. The Palestinian Authority are subdued, and we can understand why.
And what is the likelihood of finding permanent solutions to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict? You did mention that it's important to have all the parties sitting at one table, coming to a resolution with no preconditions. Options of two-state solutions have been put on the table. But what is the political appetite for that to actually even happen?
That is the problem, because the political appetite seems to be absent. And to be honest with you, I feel the whole conflict has an effect more on international law specifically, and not just what is happening in that region. And why do I say that? A couple of days ago, there was a conversation in the UN General Assembly, and the members had to vote on a resolution on the responsibility to protect. This is in relation to mass violations of human rights. You can talk of your war crimes, crimes against humanity, etc. And most of the representations that were made in that meeting were to do with the conflict between the Israelis and Palestine. And people were saying, we cannot, or rather states were saying, we cannot vote on this because its application is going to be based on who has the power to apply it. In this case, the United States. So when you look at the representations by United Arab Emirates, I think it's Peru and various other countries, they were making reference to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So the political appetite within that space between the parties that are involved is quite little, to be honest. And unfortunately, this is now spreading to affect other developments that are not linked to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So yes, I think both parties have to understand that they have to come to the table, and unless there is political appetite for it, then I'm afraid it's going to be a matter of time before violence flares up again.
Dr. Swikani Ncube, thank you once again for your insight this afternoon. Very much appreciated. Ceasefire for now and peace between Hamas and Israel. What the next steps forward will be remains to be seen, but peace ultimately being the goal, as well as a resolution of the human rights atrocities that have been experienced.